as you can see. Of course, I think there's a problem with seeing the full book because it's got a rather busy cover, and the cover has lots of names on it. And the name of the book is From Mind to Keyboard, and the author of the book is someone whose name and byline we've seen a lot in Goa. That is Sheela Jaywant. Warm welcome, Sheela, to you. Warm
Thank you,
welcome.
Rico. Thank you so
I,
much.
I've not known you for a long time, although I've read your work very often, and we got involved through the Goa Writers Group and things like that, and also we kind of did work together. We published this book together, which was a great pleasure. And it is a bit of a regret because it's such a nice book, as people keep reminding me. So that's why I hauled you on board, Sheila, today. Sorry about that,
Thank you, Rico.
because
Thank you so
because
much.
we need to talk about your book, and I need to listen to you about it. Okay, so introduce us to From Mind to Keyboard. From Mind to Keyboard. We the title came about in a bit of a hurry. That's another story, but it's a fantastic book. In a sentence, it tells you the story of a whole lot of writers and how they got into writing. Over to you, Sheila. I react enough. Please take it on.
Yeah, okay. So I joined the writers group through via email when I was in Bombay before coming to Goa. So for about 5 or 6 years, I had not met any of the writers and I didn't know where they were writing, for whom they were writing. I didn't have a clue. Then when we had the Goa Art and Literature Festival, at that time I met some of them like Jose, like you, like Bhai Mauzo, and many others, Isabel, Fatima. And somewhere along the line, when we used to have our monthly meetings or meetings every alternate month, we asked each other, how did you start writing? Who do you write for? How do you write in the morning or in the evening? Do you need to smoke when you write or do you drink tea? What is the process? And what do you write about? Some wrote plays like Isabel, some wrote technical articles, and some who are technically qualified, like Anirudh, he writes stuff for mystery stories for children. So it
So,
was a
so,
mix.
so, 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 sorry to interrupt. So, to start at the beginning, because we are presuming everyone knows what we are talking about. But From Mind to Keyboard is a book which contains 12, 13, 15, I don't know how many essays, each one telling you how people got involved in writing. And
Right.
Sheila has thrown a lot of names at you all, assuming that everyone knows all these names. But I know that it's a writerly network, so it's not essential that you recognize them. But of course, they are prominent writers, and they all have their own context, and we know them very well, and we respect them and things like that. So she was talking about Jose Lorenzo, the engineer turned writer. She was talking about
Annie.
Dr. Isabella, as Isabella Santarita was, who is the professor turned writer, and Anirudh Sengupta, who is a aeronautical engineer turned writer, and she was talking about Damodar Mauzo, also called Bhai Mauzo, who of course is an award winner of the Jnanpith Award, and she mentioned the Dr. Fatima Gracious, I think the Fatima da
Yes.
Silva Gracious, historian turned writer. So carry on. Sorry for the interruption. I
So
don't interrupt. Don't interrupt.
can I quickly read through the names and tell you a little bit? There are
Please,
about
please,
26
please.
names.
This is your interview. Do whatever you feel is right, because I don't know the subject as well as you do. Tell.
Okay, so one person who encouraged me a lot and wrote the foreword was Victor Rancho Ribero, who lives in the US and who has been writing, I think, for the last 70 years. He's in his mid 90s now and he's still writing. The
Hmm.
next was in the index, I listed everybody in alphabetical order. So it is not a random reading. Patricia Ann Alvarez was the next one. She was working before she decided to freelance. And from her, I learned how one can write for small newspapers, niche newspapers, and create a specialty for oneself. Then we had Ben Antau, who
Announced
writes
this.
from Canada. The next was Raksha Bharatiya. She's an editor for these Chicken Soup for the Indian Soul series. And requested her to write. So, though this book was meant to be for people who had some connection with Goa, some of them have indirect connections to Goa. Not all of them live here, but they are in some way connected. Xavier Cotta was next. He's a translator and he's also a writer. Jessica Falero, who's a microbiologist, and she travels the world and she writes when she can. Pantelao Fernandez, another engineer turned writer, and his books are now documenting a lot of architecture in Goa and traditions of Goa. Ria Gomes. Then we had Stephen Goodkin, who ran a newspaper here called Goa Streets. And he's written why he isn't a lawyer, why he took to writing, and he was a reporter, a high level international reporter. Then I wrote my story. Then was Harish Kapadia. He was the editor of the Himalayan Journal, which is an international journal but published from India for 40 years. He was an editor for 40 years. The next is Colonel Nilesh Korgaonkar, retired. He wrote on his travels and he wrote a very interesting blog. So, out of the names that I have listed so far, he's the only one who had a blog. Next was Desmond Macedo from Pune, who again was, I think, in a government job and then he turned humor writer. Rena Martins was working for the Telegraph. She's written about her experiences as a reporter. Odette Mascarenas, who has become now quite famous as a writer on food. Then, of course, was Damodar Mauzo, who has recently honored us with his award. The late George Menezes, again a humor columnist. For some reason, some of them have been either fiction writers or humor writers. Nandini Nair. Fatima M. Narona is local. She lives and writes from Vasco. And she has written a book of stories, short stories, and she's been published by the Fundasao Orient as well. Then Sujata Narona, who owns Bookworm. Sujata has done a lot of work to popularize books and the reading habit amongst children in particular. Next, we had Anita Pinto, who writes for children. Now, Jerry Pinto, after we published this book, Jerry Pinto won a big international award, and I was kind of feeling bad that we couldn't include it because the book had already gone into press.
I see. You couldn't include the fact that he got this award for 1.5 crore or something like that.
Oh, no, I
But
couldn't include
but
it.
his essay is included. His essay is there. His essay is there.
His essay is there, yes. Then there was Rochelle Potkar, Victor Angel Ribero, Cheryl Rao. Cheryl Rao is from Hyderabad but with connections to Goa. Cornelia Santoro, who lived in Goa and now she's in Bavaria. Nitin Sathe, he's a retired Air Force officer who writes quite a bit on military matters, but he writes a lot of fiction as well. Then Anirudh Sengupta, I found his story quite nice. How I gave up engineering for writing, that was his. Isabel de Santa Rita Vaz, whose plays are very well known. Her company, the Mustard Seed Theatre Company, is very well known in Goa. Yvonne Vaz Izdani, I must tell you an interesting bit about her. A friend of ours who spent his childhood in Burma read this book and I saw it in his house and I said, I know her. And he wanted to connect with her and he did,
I see.
recalling a lot of memories. Not many people have written about Burma of those days.
Yeah.
And the last, I wrote the backward. So
Yeah.
I read this out from the index. So you know that who the writers are who've contributed here.
Yeah.
What we've missed out though is we have a lot of writers in Goa who write in Konkani, Marathi, even in Kannada. And
Yeah.
I'm sorry that we couldn't include their work.
But it's a fascinating collection of people because there's such a wide range from bloggers to freelance writers to journalists to
Yes,
artists to
playwrights,
and each one is telling their own story of how they got involved in writing. But
correct.
to get a taste of it, I'm struggling a bit to show the right pages because okay, now it's coming. Now finally, fine. No, it's still not coming. I'm still not getting. Okay, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So that's the breakup of the table of contents for you, and then there are these essays which are illustrated by our friend Bina Naik, our friend and artist, who is an artist turned writer. She's published her first novel recently, and she's been
Yes.
part of the Goa Writers Group for a long time. But yeah, that's very interesting because she kept doing these illustrations out of her own interest, and she took so much trouble, and each essay is illustrated with these pictures which add so much, with these black and white pictures which add so much value to the full essay. But to get a feel of one essay, for example, the best I can do is to ask you, Sheila, to explain how you got into writing. And somehow, because I was so caught up with editing, and not so much editing but just publishing, the mere fact of publishing the book, there's a lot of work involved in publishing. I didn't get down to submitting an essay myself. And someone said that, why did Sheila leave you out, and why did you leave yourself out? And I thought to myself, yes, I got a lot of stories to tell, but that doesn't
Well,
matter.
let me
Tell us
let
your
me
story.
first yes, let me first tell the viewers how you bullied me into this. I was
I'm a big
standing
bully.
outside. Yes, I
I'm
know.
I'm a
Rico,
big
it's
bully.
my turn to talk.
I'm yes, yeah, I'll keep quiet in 10 seconds. I'm a big bully, and whatever Sheila says is true. Carry on.
Right. So I was standing outside a shop at around 2 in the afternoon in Panji, and Rico came on his motorcycle and he said, "Sign here." He gave me a form and he told me, "Sign here." I didn't know what I was signing, but I trusted him.
No, no, a little bit of drama. You're adding
No,
drama.
I am not. I'm telling them the truth.
Tell,
And
tell,
so
tell.
I did sign it, and this was a form for getting a grant from the government of Goa. Very grateful to the government for having given us that grant. And Rico finally did publish it.
Sheila, let me interrupt if you don't mind. I'll give you all the time in the world, but just to tell my version of the same story. Okay, so what was happening in those days? The government of Goa, Directorate of Art and Culture, had a good scheme where they would give authors a grant before they wrote a book. So when some of us publishers felt that author had a book in them, and maybe we were running a bit short of money, or we didn't want to take such a big risk, we couldn't take that big risk. We would ask them to approach the government for a grant. So I had already discussed this possibility with Sheila, and at that stage, as I remember it, it all fell into place, and I hurried Sheila into applying for it, and she applied and she got. Sorry, your story, tell.
Right. So I will just read a part from the last, the backword, as I've named it, because this applies to all writers. I'm reading the first paragraph. Not all writers make a lot of money. Not all get famous, but like musicians, artists, sportspersons, teachers, medical professionals, soldiers, and research scientists, they all claim to get satisfaction from what they do, irrespective of what they earn. I know at least two engineers who are earning good money, one in the UAE and a doctor who quit the lucre to join the tribe of scribes. The worn and dusty footwear, the jostling in public transport, the suspense regarding payments seemed not to bother them at all. Contrariwise, the struggle seemed to prod them to write more. At a meeting of the Goa Writers Group 2 years ago, this was now 8 years back, we wrote about our personal journeys and circulated the essays amongst the others. It was like getting to know other people's secrets. How and why did they get into the profession? Who discouraged them? Did they earn? Which time of the day was their most creative? Did they snack or smoke whilst writing? Did they sit in corners and type facing the wall? So, for those who want to get into the profession, if they are young and if they are in college, then I would strongly recommend that you work for an organization first. Learn how systems work, learn a little bit about administration, because finally you have to learn to pitch. You have to learn to write what the editor wants, what will sell in the market, and then how to negotiate for the earnings. There is some amount of paperwork involved, there is some amount of drudgery involved, and that every newcomer must know. If it is creative writing one is doing, or you just want to write for yourself and friends, even then, daily writing uh, is important. That discipline is something that has to be developed. Wendell Rodrigues, the first book which he wrote, The Green Room, It came about because in the Goa writers, we had a challenge. Everybody write 1,000 words a day or 500 words a day, which none of us did except two people. One is Vinita Coelho, who later on went to get a lot of awards for her books, and the other one was Wendell Rodrigues. So it is really important. I don't know when Vinita writes, but Wendell told me that he writes early in the morning from 5 a.m. to 9 o'clock or something like that. So each one has their own timetable, but daily writing is a must. This is what came from almost all the essays that were here. I would like at random to randomly, I'm picking out one uh, para, which is by Ria Gomes, Grandma's Little Storyteller. I picked this paragraph at random, but I must say that if you have to be a good writer, you need to read, read, read. There is just no magic. If you have to be a good musician, you have to listen to music first and know the different tunes. Similarly, here you have to develop your own style. Not that it takes very long, but you need to read different kinds of stories, articles, plays, short stories, novels, historical novels, non-fiction, technically even shampoo labels for that matter. But you need to read.
Read everything and anything.
Yes, yes. It becomes such a habit that now, if something is wrapped in a newspaper or a small bit of paper, I open it, I smoothen it out, and I read it. It's just habit now.
Can I interrupt you and ask you
Yes.
to begin at the start of your story, how you were struggling to get started when you were in all these military camps all over the place?
Right, one moment.
And then we can go to this side of the story of the final tips. But even the starting story is very interesting, isn't it?
Right. Okay. So I'm reading the first para of my own essay. Halwara Bareli Tambram had poor electricity and erratic water supply. The title of my essay was The World of Words, because I've lived in several places, but the one thing that carried me through was the reading habit and the world of words.
As an
So,
Air Force wife.
as an Air Force wife, yes, I've written that. So, Halwara Bareli Tambram had poor electricity and erratic water supply, negligible social activity, and offered plenty of time to read. My husband's frequently transferable job made me set up homes in other exotic places like Avantipur, Wellington, Srinagar. Sweltering afternoons saw me sitting cross legged on the floor, scribbling self invented shorthand on pads made with used or recycled envelopes. Even buying paper was wasteful. So I used to make use of, we didn't even know the word recycle at that time. It was not common. We're talking about the 1970s.
Mid
But
70s,
we
mid
used
70s, early 70s.
late 70s,
Okay.
77, 78, 79, that period. 1980, whatever. But actually, I did a course in journalism, which was a correspondence course, and the
Where,
anonymous
where,
student.
where?
There was something known as the British Language Institutes in Bombay, and they had this correspondence course. We were in Srinagar. And the teachers, the tutors who were anonymous, I didn't know any of them, but in red ink, they used to say, "Why don't you send this to Eve's Weekly? Why don't you send this to Women's Era?" And I did. And so by the time I actually started writing, it was 1983. And I used to put it in an envelope with a self-addressed stamped envelope inside and a covering letter and typed. And I would send this to the editors. It took about maybe a week for it to reach them. And by the time I got a response, a month would have gone by. So till then, I didn't know whether it was rejected or accepted. But I must tell you that the editors in those days, they were courteous enough to send it back with a comment. It has been rejected for a particular reason. Maybe we've just carried this story, or this is of no value to our magazine, you could try and send it elsewhere. And now, today, when I send emails, I don't even know whether anyone has bothered to read that email.
What you're saying is very interesting. It's very interesting and very important. I think that's an important point you're making.
Writers who are starting out, I think it's useful to know to pitch properly in 150 words, maybe if it is non-fiction, and send it to a personal email ID. I have a suspicion that many of these IDs, the emails which are there on websites, are not looked at.
Sheila, one
It's a
sec.
suspicion.
You were describing, we are talking of two things here. One is where you pitch, where you send a suggestion and you see how the editor responds. That's called you submit
Non-fiction.
a pitch. Yeah. And the other thing is where you write on spec, which is short form for on speculation. So what
Yes,
you were describing first is you write a full article, you send it. If they like it, they carry it. If they don't, that's it. Then you maybe send it somewhere else. So in those days there was more submitting on spec, and today is more pitch. Is that what you're saying?
absolutely. You have to pitch nowadays. Uh, you can't just send an article, nobody will read it.
Small
If it
chance of it getting
comes
used. Small
to,
chance.
when it comes to writing short stories and creative work, it's a very, very small market. So if you are just stepping into this, make sure that you have some way of paying your bills on time, because you're not going to get paid for a large amount of the writing that you do. Or even that, it's not a continuous flow of income if it is creative writing.
I'm so glad you made that point and you made it so upfront, because people think of writing as highly lucrative. They look at a few famous writers and they think that we are going to become like them. There is a small chance of that happening, but it's a small. The emphasis on the word small. What can really happen is you could get a full-time job in a newspaper that could help you. Even if you want to go into creative writing tomorrow, it could propel you into that career, or it might become viable for you to become a full-time freelancer or something like that. But
It
good, you
doesn't
made
have
that
to
point.
be in a publishing house or with a magazine or a newspaper. I have never worked in a newspaper or a magazine office. I've always held a job, and then after coming home, I've been writing.
That's one model, Sheila. But just to be fair, I would also like to say that I like the idea of writing, not so much creative writing. And I realized when I was 19 that I got an opening, and I realized the best way to make it viable was to take a full time job, to pick up your skills there, and then eventually to branch out into whatever style of writing you want to do. So that also works.
Probably also a
Yeah,
matter of opportunity. I didn't get the opportunity to join a newspaper or a magazine.
yeah. You had a small
So
young
one has
family and things like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
probably also the
Fair
places.
enough.
I was not in a big place, so
Carry
that
on,
could
carry
not
on,
help.
carry on, carry on, please.
Um, okay, so I once had a small conversation with an author, Shobha Dev, and she said that, like it or not, you have to treat it like a product and you have to be involved in the marketing of it. You can't say, I've written a novel and brush your hands off and expect that the publisher will do the marketing for you. No, you have to be actively involved. So that is a skill which also I think people should develop. Just as you want to pitch your article, which means you want to market it. So also if you've written a book, if it's a novel or a short story, collection of short stories or something, then the marketing skill has to be there. I've self-published two books, three books, and I found it difficult to market. So this is a skill that has to be developed.
Hmm. Absolutely
So
agree
that,
with you.
yeah, so in Mind to Keyboard, these aspects have been covered. So it's what has been covered is the kinds of writing like translation, like non-fiction, like fiction, writing for children, travel writing, writing about history, like I told you about Yvonne's book on Burma, playwriting. So all these different aspects have been covered here. So also the practical aspects, like Patricia Ann Alvarez has very nicely written how to make a bill, how to present it to, you don't present it to the editor, but then you have an account section to go to and all that. So the nitty gritties have also been covered in this.
Yeah, it covers a lot of ground. Tell us
And
about your
now,
sorry. Carry
yeah,
on, carry on.
tell us
No,
about.
tell us about your own writing experience, your books, and you. I interrupted you when you were starting out. So in your initial days, it was very tough, and you had to write, submit all these things
Okay,
by
so I'll go
post.
backwards. See
Go.
now, right. So I'll just go backwards because now a lot of people have blogs. And if a blog is valuable, a blog can be picked up by advertisers. So I know one or two people who are actually getting paid for the blogging that they do. It could be travel or food or book reviews or architecture for the construction industry, for pharmaceuticals. So these are blogs which are for healthcare, which do attract advertisements. And they are not long writings. It's like 500 words or 700 words. Word count is very, very important, especially in today's world with SMS, where you go not even by the word count, but by the characters, the number of characters that are there. Whereas in my time, the journey was different. The first, second, and third books that I self-published, but they were all compilations of work that was already printed either in a newspaper or in a magazine.
Your writings, your own
Uh,
writings.
yes, so it had already been through an editorial process. A lot of the people who self-publish, they ignore editing. And without editing, there is no smoothness in the writing. I mean, some people are really good at it. They write and edit as they go on, but not everybody can do that. So editing is important. Even in translations, I have found I do Marathi to English translations. After I've done the translation and after I have adapted it, made it smooth, I always give it to somebody who can edit, who can see it with fresh eyes so that it goes error free. It definitely makes a difference. So that's a mistake. A lot of people who self-publish, they give it to friends, sister, husband, but not to a professional editor. And it does
We,
make a difference. It doesn't help that you've been to a good school or a good college or anything. No, it doesn't make a difference.
we won't see our own mistakes. We are blind to our own mistakes in that sense. So that's a fact. But this is,
That's right.
yeah.
Yes.
This is as far as the mid level of writing is concerned. Once you are into it, how to polish it up. Can you give us a few hints of how to get in what you were referring to in passing earlier? If
Right.
someone wants to get
So,
started.
so if I were a 19-year-old today, or if I were a 20-year-old today, in my time, we used to open the magazine to the first page and you get the name of the editor and the address. And I would send the letters over there. It still works. But if you want to send it, let's say, to somebody in New York, you want to send it to the New York Times or the Paris Review, then you have to go on their site and see how they want it submitted. Is it through submittable, or is it through the website, or is it through an email? Some of the magazines, even now, they want things sent by regular mail. And
Yeah.
since we are in India and the stuff abroad, it's not possible. Within India, if you want to start, if I were a 19-year-old, I would start with the local papers first. If I want to do reporting or any kind of writing, if I'm in Goa, I would go to a newspaper and say, I want to, how do I start? Or I would cover a particular subject, let's say sports, and cover only sports events and submit
Become
it
good
to
at
the
it.
editor.
Get a name for it. Become good
That's
at it.
right. That's right. But I would specialize. If I was writing on wildlife, I would write only on wildlife. If I would not generalize, I would not be a generalist, I would be a journalist. So over a period of time, you get to know people, you get to know events, and you become a master of that particular subject. That's what I would do. I would not worry so much about the income. That comes later.
Yeah, building your
After
brand,
you have
building your
had,
image. Yeah.
yeah, when you have expertise, then people invite you to write. You get assignments, you get projects, they come your way. And then you make a name, then you can move ahead to the national newspapers and then so your stepping stone, it's very easy to take a step in your local newspapers. But having said that, since we have access to the world sitting at us, the same story you can write in a different way for a magazine elsewhere. For example, I had written an article on the Sassoon docks in Bombay, which was actually accepted by one of the local newspapers, but then it didn't get published here. It got published in Pakistan. because
Amazing,
Karachi and
amazing.
Bombay at one time, yeah, Sassoon dock was a known dock 100 years ago, and paper
What
cuts
Bombay is to
magazine.
India, what Bombay is to India, Karachi is to Pakistan. So it makes sense that they would, the port cities of both places.
Yes,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. And actually, it got picked up on Facebook because I had said, that this article I had written and nobody wanted it. And somebody whom I had met in Pakistan, she was on the editorial team, and she said, "Send it to me. Let me take a look at it." And it did get published. And that was luck. You can't always depend on luck. You have to actually make your way. So very often, if I write a letter, let's say on Porvorim in Goa, and I might add on to it and send it to a paper in Calcutta or Delhi, or who knows, I might send it to a paper in Sri Lanka and might get published there, or Japan, Russia. It just depends on how I have pitched it, whether I've chosen politics or football. If it is football, there are so many sites on football. One might interview Brahmanand Sakhwalkar and send his interview there, and plus write about the Santosh Trophy. So there are various aspects to a single story, and one story you can have multiple checks.
True, but Sheila, when we talk about getting started, there is this problem of rejection. It's just like when a young guy falls for someone else, he gets rejected. So here also, when you're writing, you could get rejected by your editors, and it can be quite demoralizing when you get rejected, especially if they don't tell you. In your case, they would tell you in those days. Now people don't have time and all that. So, would it make sense to say pitch for the alternative media, to set up your own blog, to build a reputation for yourself that way, and then wait for people to also wait for editors to come and kind of pick you up and notice your work? Would that work?
See, with fiction, when I send a story and it gets rejected, I take it very personally. I feel I've written such a good story, and the editor doesn't really understand what I've written, etc. But rejections are a very good way of knowing that, look, this is not something that other people like. You might like it a hell of a lot, but others won't. I'll give you an example. One of my books, it's called The Liftman and Other Stories, in which there are about 5 or 6 prize winning stories in that anthology. This was self published. So I had given it to somebody to review. And that person, he wrote in, it was a tiny little review, but he said that most of the stories were boring middle class stories. There's no murder, there was no sex, they were boring middle class stories. So that was an eye opener to me.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about the negative remarks. To me, these are equivalent to rejects. In another's book, the first book, Quilted Stories of the Indian Middle Class, that was the title. In that, one person had written in the review that her language is very, very gentle, very, very simple. Now, I didn't know whether that was a compliment or not. Now, all these stories had been published, they'd been read by readers. The editor said, but to me, even a bad review is equal to a rejection. That means that reviewer did not like my work. And so, for the stories that I wrote after that, I made sure that I had absorbed that criticism. The language should not be
Hmm.
very gentle, but it should not be high flown either. Maybe I should consider other aspects of human life, human characters. So, rejection is a learning experience. I don't think one needs to, unless you're writing a timely, newsworthy article, which is topical. Otherwise, rejection is a way to learn.
But Sheila, just as a
It's like getting a
counterpoint,
red tick mark on your exam paper. You've made a mistake.
is it not possible that someone may
Cannot.
reject that? Sorry, that someone may reject a perfectly legit piece, a well written piece, because it doesn't meet their needs, because they don't have space in that issue, or because something is lacking on their side, not necessarily with your writing, or that you pitch it in the wrong place, or
Yes,
they don't like your perspective. Yeah.
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so
If they have a good article and an advertisement that's paying them well, they might well choose the advertisement and junk your article. That happens.
yeah,
That
there is a
happens.
shortage of space. So would getting started on a website make sense today?
It is demoralizing.
Starting your own blog, starting your own, submitting to a website, submitting to a place which doesn't pay or pays you very little. Uh, you can't hear? You can't hear? Can you hear me?
I'm signaling. I'm telling him I can't hear.
Okay. Just I can hear you. I can hear you. Just a sec. One sec. Okay, we
All
have a
right.
slight. Just a sec. Oops. Is it okay now? No? Can you hear? Oops, some
I can
slight
hear you
problem.
now, but
Okay, fine.
you.
Bit muffled, bit muffled, or give me a sec. I'll sort that out.
No, it's not synchronizing with what you're saying. Not synchronizing with your visual.
Okay, don't worry about that. Don't worry. There is a small momentary lapse. So let me check one. Yeah, front. Okay, now it should be somewhat better. So what I was saying
Okay.
is that is it practical to start your own blog to submit to a place which doesn't pay you so well,
If
to a
you are confident about writing on the same topic, then yes, it is worthwhile doing a blog. Yes, it is. Suppose, for example, I write on footwear and I write about designs, I write about leather, I write about the leather industry. By the time you've done 50 blogs, you've done 50 posts on your blog, you have gained some expertise.
you'll become such an expert on it that someone or the other is going to recognize you and appreciate your work.
Exactly. But you need to market your blog. You need to market your blog also. You have to send links to the correct people.
The other thing is precisely at that point. The other thing is because we are sitting in a small place like Goa, it can become a little bit tough to write on wider issues from here, right? In that sense, unless you market your blog well and
Yeah.
unless you, yeah. So how did you overcome that? I know you have a varied kind of portfolio of writing, including translation from Marathi into English, books, short stories.
Okay, so I realized that my strength in the case of translation, my strength was that I knew Marathi. So Marathi into English I could do, and the first opportunity came by chance. I wasn't looking for it. Somebody actually asked me to do a translation of a book. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and then by word of mouth, I got a couple of more books to do. So this was word of mouth. I was not looking for it. I did not ever have to pitch for it. But in translation, funnily enough, there are people who are experts at translating labels. They are experts at translating pharmaceutical forms. You have these consent forms. So you have to have some technical knowledge. If you don't have the technical knowledge, it's fine. You will pick it up along the way. So all writing is not creative, it's not literary. You have technical writing, you have writing in advertisement, you have content writing. So there are various kinds. So the scope for writing is huge as compared to what it was even 15 years ago.
Technical writing being this field where we write labels, we write advertisements, you write books, you write boring stuff, you get paid well in that sense if you can reach out to the right
Well, there
market,
are
correct?
automobile magazines, there are magazines on cement and building and construction, there are magazines for which cover architecture. Not all the people who write are architects themselves. There are many writers who cover homes, interiors, the furniture industry.
In brief about your books, your own books.
Okay, so the first one was Quilted Stories of Middle Class India, which was a compilation of short stories which were already published. The second one was Melting Moments, which was a compilation of the middles that I used to write for the Indian Express and a newspaper called News Time, which no longer exists.
Hyderabad.
The third book was Liftman and Other Stories, which were largely prize winning stories, as I told you before. Where did these stories win prizes? On a site in Canada called toastedcheese.com. There were some other sites called choke.com, and many of these sites now may not exist. Glimmer Train was a good site, which again doesn't exist anymore. After that, there was one book which I wrote on patients' experiences of ulcerative colitis, more than an upset stomach. That was a fiction, a very thin book which was published to be distributed to patients. Again, that was my first attempt at interviewing people and putting that together as a non-fiction book. And then I decided that I was not good at marketing the books. I didn't make any profit on it at all. It was very expensive to do, but it was not something that I wanted to do again. So after that, all the stories that have found their way into anthologies have been because I've actually looked for, okay, now where can I send it now? And then there are places where occasionally you come across a small advertisement in a newspaper that they're looking for short stories, and you send them, and they get published. Do I get paid? No, not necessarily. Do I get royalty? No, not necessarily. In fact, not at all. But then there are competitions like Fundasa Orient holds an annual competition of short stories, which I think is unique. It's probably the only one in India that has good prizes, first, second, and third, really good prizes. It's worth
Starting at
attempting to send
25,000.
to
The
places
first prize
like
is
these.
25,000, but the competition is also quite strong.
Yes, that's
So
not bad at all.
yeah, yeah,
Yes, yeah.
that's good. So so
But
so
if people are writing in Marathi, then there is
Marathi is
yeah,
a huge
you're saying
market.
something?
Marathi is a huge market because you have this
Yes.
million, 100 million population out there, and I think that writers in Goa should also look to markets outside Goa. Whether in languages outside of English, whether it's Marathi or whatever it is, because that opens up possibilities.
There's one thing I missed out is in writing, which my book doesn't have, is script writing for television, for advertisements. Script writing is huge money and it's also creative. Writing for films is another, but script writing for television, I have no experience of that. I mean, very little experience of that. Earlier, I have written for UGC, and for one corporate company, I had written a small film, but they pay.
Sheila, is it time? Is it time? Now we are reaching the end of the interview, but is it time for another from mind to keyboard? You'll say I'm always bringing this thing on you, volume two or something like
Yes,
that.
I think so. I think so because, besides these writers, there are many young ones. I think we should have another because life has changed. This book has been pre-internet days, and
Hmm.
internet has changed all our lives. In through the lockdown, a lot of people have started writing. I read a book called Masala Lab, which is written by, I forget the name, but in during the lockdown, he actually researched and found out the science behind all our recipes. So he came out with a book which was very, very good. But
Yeah,
now, well, some large publishing houses are pulping books because they're shutting down, which is sad news.
which is sad. I think West End has just closed down, which was Tata Press owned
Correct.
by bought over by Amazon, and then Amazon closed it down, and all these kind of things. But
Right.
just by the way, I'm not. I promise you, I'm not pitching for this book because I'm connected with it and because I published it and because Sheila wrote it, but just because of one thing. Whoever reads this book, and we printed only 500 copies, so it's not hugely read or something like that. We did the minimum we could, but whoever has read it says it's such a good book. It's so understated, it's so undernoticed, and I feel really guilty about it. So, and all the essays contain such a important learning. I think that students of the media, mass media and all should read it, and to put our money where our mouth is, to put yeah to put our money where our mouth is. Both Sheila and me have actually
Maybe,
decided.
maybe it should be prescribed, as part of the reading syllabus
Yeah,
for
but before
the
but
journalism
Sheila,
courses.
But before someone thinks we are pushing a commercial product, Sheila and me were thinking of actually putting it down as an ebook in that sense,
You're
and
breaking
making it
up.
okay. No, no, I think I should be okay, Sheila. I think I should be okay. Maybe it's your volume, but I'll carry on. So Sheila and me were thinking of putting it
Yeah.
out as an ebook and making sure that it gets read at little or no cost or whatever. That's not the point. But it's got a lot of learnings there, and I hope it does get read. So that's the bit of the good news. You want to get a copy of this? Get in touch with Sheila or me. Maybe we should have an ebook shortly. I don't know. Maybe even it might be unpriced if we are in a generous mood at
It's a
that point.
very,
But
very practical book. It's very, very practical.
that's true. That's true. I will agree with you. And this is not a marketing gimmick for sure. But Sheila, any contact numbers where people can contact you for advice and things like that?
Yes, my email is there on the book.
If you
I've
can
given
just
my
share it with
email.
me, if you could just
Right.
share it
It's
with me, I'll
sheelajayavant@yahoo.co.in.
SHE. And your phone number, if you
Do you
want
want me
to.
to type it? Should I type
No,
it?
you tell me because
I
I
can
can
type
type
it
it.
on the private.
Private chat will
Okay.
go private. If I type it here, it'll go on the screen. So you tell me. Just tell
Okay.
me.
sheelajayavant
Yeah,
at
that I got.
yahoo.co.in.
Number, contact number, WhatsApp.
Phone number I don't give because it's,
Okay, fine.
with my
Fair enough.
work, it gets loaded with calls.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. So I'll just share that. I'll just share that screen. Yeah. Anything I forgot to ask you, or you would like to add, or something of that sort? Because
Well, like in many other professions, actually, there's no such thing as timings here. Sometimes you have to write in the middle of the night, or you just carry on writing for 4 hours or 5 hours at a stretch. It's not easy.
but I
It's not,
but
you can't take it lightly. And
it's a serious job. It's a serious job and it's hard work, but it's
yeah,
thoroughly enjoyable. Would you agree? It's thoroughly enjoyable. It's a new job every day. You
lot of
don't feel bored.
satisfaction.
Immense,
Lot of
immense,
satisfaction. Lots and
immense.
lots. I'm not giving it up.
The feedback is the biggest high, isn't it, Sheila? The feedback when you get
Yes.
feedback. So
Even
can
if
you
a
tell us?
single reader gets back to you.
Can you share with us two or three interesting ways of feedback or pieces of feedback you got?
Right. There was a gentleman, some Mr. Ali in Sikandrabad, who wrote on a on a personalized letterhead, and in those days that was really rare. And he's in ink. He has written and signed uh, a letter to the editor saying that he enjoyed my column. After a long time, he has read something that he really enjoyed, which was a humor column. I've preserved that letter. And that was one. But very recently, there's a girl who was working for Gomantak Times, and she used to write on health issues and military issues, which was so contradictory. But
Diverse,
I
no?
liked,
Spread out, spread out.
yeah, Nibedita is her name, and I just wanted to meet her because her articles were so good. So I called her home, and her response after that, she says, I was so thrilled that a reader was so affected by my article that she got called home for breakfast. But I knew what the feeling was like. If a reader writes and your name is, a stranger writes your name, it's really nice. So when I used to go meet to places, and somebody would say, "Are you the Sheila Jayavant whose name comes in the XYZ newspaper?" And I would say yes. I just feel, I don't know, it's a high.
Yeah. Two or three pieces of work which you remember the most, which are your favorite pieces of work, whether they are articles, short stories, or books.
One of my favorite stories, it won a prize, was on uh, a, a fighter pilot who had ejected from an aircraft and he hits a bird. And the story is told in from the bird's point of view. The bird has died, but it's told from the bird's point of view, as if the bird's ghost has come to visit the fighter pilot. Because we always give, oh, so many 22 crores gone down the drain, and the pilot's life was saved, but nobody really looks at the flock of birds that's been hit. So that was one. And there was another one on the locust attack when we were in Jodhpur. There was a cloud of locusts which had come. So that experience I had converted into a story. These two are my favorites.
Wow. Wow. Thanks for sharing,
Thank
Sheila.
you, Rico.
I hope that your work in this mentoring of young people continues. It's so interesting. And I hope that
Yes,
we can put out this ebook, charged or uncharged, so that people can read it. It's amazing work. And I don't think, as a person in writing myself, although I'm technically a publisher, I also understand that we work so that it's read. We write so that it's read, not so that someone makes a million. No one makes, but it should be spread. So looking
I miss
forward to
it.
for
I miss writing my column, my humor column that went on for nearly 20 years. 17 years in
wow.
one newspaper and 3 years in another newspaper. But I miss writing it so much.
Which was
Maybe they
called?
don't
Which
have a
was called?
place.
Which
Bikram Bhajun Kha.
Bikna Bazun Kha.
Yeah,
Eat if fry the roast the monkey nuts and eat it. Roast the peanuts and eat it. So
yeah.
typically go on saying. But just to put you in context, original name Wagle. Your mom is the late Mangala Wagle. It would be very unfair to end this interview without hearing a little about her. She was such a personality. I remember her.
So my mother grew up in Palole, Kankon. She was born there when Goa was under Portuguese rule, and till 1973, Palole did not have electricity. Many of my childhood vacations were spent there. Her brothers were involved in fighting against the Portuguese to liberate Goa. My eldest mama married a Portuguese woman, which complicated matters quite a bit
Pundali
because,
Kaitonde. Pundali Kaitonde. PB
right, so
Kaitonde.
Edila Gaitonde died a couple of months ago, aged 100 plus. And during the world, somewhere between the world wars, they got married, and she came from Portugal to India. She was Pakli. She was a white skin married to a Hindu Goan, and she lived in that village. She learned Konkani, which is quite remarkable for those times. Also remarkable that my grandparents accepted her as a daughter-in-law. Different religion. She was Catholic, we were Hindus. She ate vinegar, never mind the other meats. But oh my God, she used vinegar in her cooking, which was terrible. But they
Hindus don't use
accepted all.
vinegar, no? Don't use vinegar, which is something we and Catholics use
Yeah.
it. And
And she used to
so
put salt in her rice. Oh my God, that was another thing.
put it in.
We laugh at it now, but I think at that time it was so my mother grew up in that kind of an environment which was fairly progressive, and at the end of her life, she decided to devote her time and energy to street children, to educating street children.
Interesting. And of course, textiles and a friendship with textiles, promoting khadi textiles, promoting
Khadi,
cotton.
yeah, because she was a Gandhi and she liked the idea of khadi.
And the fashion show she had with Wendell and many things. I've met her many times, and she would always tell me something or the other, push me on to doing something. And she probably saw me as one of these, eccentric, off-centric guys who could might make a difference anywhere. I don't know, but it's
Yeah.
interesting. Thanks a ton, Sheila, for
I
your
can
time.
see your library at the back, Rico. I love your books.
No, that's just an ad for myself. It's not. Some of them are. I've got this huge Goa book collection of 3,000 Goa books at my side, but some of them at the back are my books which are published. So it shouldn't be taken too seriously. But my Goa books collection, I'm very proud of, and very. That's the only thing in my life I boast about. But for those who joined us late, this is Sheela Jaywant. She's the author of the book From Mind to Keyboard, which is an excellent book on mentoring and entering the field of writing, freelance writing, short story writing, whole lot of genres of writing. So we are planning to put it out as an ebook and probably a free ebook. If you know where to get it, you'll get it free. This is her address. Get in touch with her, badger her, and read it. I'm not saying that you should read it because we want to earn from the sales, but you should read it because it's a good book. Thanks so much, Sheila. Thanks so much for your time and all the best. Looking
Thank you,
forward to
Rico.
looking forward to a part two of that. That's my last ending saying bye.
Certainly.